Have you ever wondered why the same types of people, those who hurt you, confuse you, or drain your spirit, keep reappearing in your life? They don't come by accident. They come because they sense something in you, a certain energy, an unhealed wound, a door left unconsciously open. But the more unsettling truth is this: the problem might not be them. It might be what you're allowing. Some people seem immune to toxicity, not because they fight harder, but because they no longer live on a frequency chaos can reach. They have changed. And that change didn't begin with arguments or dramatic goodbyes. It began with silence, with stopping, not reacting, not explaining, not pleasing. And in that stillness, you become a boundary toxic people cannot cross. This video will show you, with just one inner shift, the toxic ones will have no path back. 1. Inner change breaks the toxic cycle. Some relationships in life seem coincidental, but in truth, they are the result of signals we silently emit. Toxic people don't appear by accident. They are drawn to something unhealed within us. A lack of firmness, a habit of people-pleasing, or simply the fear of letting someone go without closure. We can complain about being trapped in recurring negative cycles, yet rarely do we pause to ask, what within us keeps inviting these patterns back? And that's when we must face a difficult truth. The toxic cycle isn't just caused by others, but is also sustained by the deficiencies in our own inner world. Most people think setting boundaries is an outward action, saying no, walking away, or showing resolve. But those are only surface-level expressions. Real change doesn't begin with words, but with what you no longer allow to exist inside you. As long as you still care what others think, still need to be understood, still feel obligated to explain why you're leaving, you're keeping the door open for those who know how to manipulate your emotions. Toxic people don't just survive on weakness. They feed off the need to connect through chaos. They need your reaction. They need your explanation. They need your effort to maintain the relationship, even when you're hurting. But something unexpected happens when you stop reacting. Stop explaining and stop playing their game. You don't need to appear strong, say cold things, or make a dramatic exit. All it takes is one small but radical shift. You no longer respond the way you used to. When someone says something unpleasant, you don't reply. When they poke your weakness, you remain still. When they leave and come back, you no longer need closure. And it's in that calmness, in that lack of reaction, where the true boundary lies. And this is not just philosophy, it's biology. When your nervous system is no longer triggered by emotional blows, when your mind learns that safety doesn't come from pleasing others, but from living in alignment with your values, you start to emit a different signal. Toxic people no longer recognize you. They feel lost in your quiet presence, because the version of you that once tried to hold everything together, that got pulled into every argument, that feared abandonment, no longer exists. This change doesn't come from the outside. It begins with a silent decision. You no longer betray yourself to hold on to something that's no longer worthy. And once that happens, you don't need to push anyone out of your life. They'll withdraw on their own because there's nothing left for them to take. It's not that you set a boundary. You became the boundary. And from that moment, the toxic cycle begins to end. 2. Silence is strength. In a world where quick reactions are seen as a survival instinct, where everyone rushes to speak up, to defend, to explain, to avoid being misunderstood. Silence becomes a rare choice, often mistaken for weakness, submission, or a lack of conviction. But the Stoic understands what much of the modern world has forgotten. Silence is not the absence of voice, but the presence of strength. It's not that you don't know how to respond. It's that you choose not to. And that choice is the mark of someone who has mastered their inner world. Recall the moments you were provoked, pushed into a corner, compelled to argue, to prove you were right. That feeling comes fast, like a wave rushing through your chest, heart racing, body tense, mind swirling with comebacks. That's not reason guiding you. That's your nervous system triggering survival mode. You're not speaking from clarity. You're reacting from self-defense. And every time you do, you let someone else control your state of being. Timely silence breaks that cycle. When you refuse to speak in a moment of impulsiveness, when you step back instead of stepping into conflict, when you choose to breathe slowly instead of unleashing sharp words, you're not weakening. You're building an invisible shield, a space within that no one can penetrate. What's worth noting is that toxic people don't need your agreement or disagreement. They only need your participation. They feed on reaction, on emotional energy, to sustain the chaos they're familiar with. But if you deny them that, if you stay silent with steady eyes and a grounded presence, all their tools become useless. This isn't avoidance or suppression. It's self-command, the ability to stop yourself from reacting to what isn't worthy of your energy. And something strange happens. Instead of feeling overpowered, you begin to feel light. You no longer need to win. You don't need the final word. You let others speak. You let the storm pass, and you remain still, not shaken, not drawn in, not waiting for applause to affirm your rightness. The Stoic sees silence as a sign of wisdom, integrity, and courage. For to stay silent in the face of insult or misunderstanding is no easy task. But in that moment, you choose not to engage in a needless battle. You've won the deepest kind of victory. Not over others, but over the wounded part of yourself. 3. Guard your line. Preserve your energy. In a world of endless noise and chaos, there's a quiet strength few pay attention to. The ability to hold yourself, to know when to stay silent and when to turn inward instead of pouring your energy out trying to please others. Your boundary isn't what you declare. It's not a line written in anger or spoken in defense. Your true boundary is where you choose not to step every single day. The decision not to respond to manipulative messages, not to get pulled into pointless arguments, not to explain your silence to those who never valued your presence. Each morning when you wake, your mind holds a limited amount of mental energy. Every time you use it trying to decode someone else's emotions, interpreting a distant look, or wondering what you did wrong in a relationship, you drain that energy. And the irony is, you're exhausting yourself over things you can't control. Your attention is like electricity. It lights up whatever you direct it toward. If you aim it at chaos, you brighten the very shadows that were meant to fade. The Stoic knows that not everything demands a reaction, not every word deserves a reply, and not every discontent from others is yours to fix. When you begin to guard your line, you stop pouring energy into battles that hold no value. You become selective about your spaces, your people, your conversation. And slowly you'll notice the things that once rattled you, once provoked you, once made you anxious, can no longer touch you. because you've risen above that frequency. True boundaries don't come from saying, "I don't accept this." They come from not being there to be affected at all. You don't need to make others understand. You don't need to reclaim your image or your voice. Your peace doesn't depend on controlling what they think. It comes from no longer caring. When you begin channeling your energy toward growth, toward healthy habits, toward a clear and grounded mindset, you'll lose interest in the tangled stories that once held you back. Guarding your boundary doesn't mean becoming cold or isolated. It means showing up with presence. It means saying no to distractions, to repeated scripts, to relationships that ask you to sacrifice yourself. It means no longer asking permission to be at peace and living as though peace is your default. And from that moment, you'll no longer be swept away by outer chaos because you've learned to anchor yourself within. 4. Transform quietly and grow in silence. True growth makes no noise, needs no spotlight, and seeks no applause or external validation. It happens in silence, where no one is watching, where you quietly face the parts of yourself that remain incomplete. It's in the early mornings you choose discipline over compromise, the late nights you sit with your thoughts instead of running from your feelings, the moments you choose not to react to provocation but simply observe and let it pass. All of these small things are silently building a new version of you, steadier, clearer, no longer so easily swept into chaos. The problem is that most of us get trapped in the need to prove we've changed. We want others to see that we're stronger, less vulnerable, no longer ruled by emotion. But that very desire to be seen is a trap. When change is still fragile, it's easily shaken by judgmental eyes, easily pulled back into the old self by a familiar word or a recurring behavior from someone who once hurt us. That is why the Stoic always encourages quiet transformation. Not out of fear, but out of a deep understanding that growth needs space to take root. Just as you can't pull a sprouting seed from the soil to prove it's growing, you can't drag your transformation into the light too early if it hasn't gone deep, hasn't grown strong. You need silence, not to separate yourself from the world, but to protect the new order forming within you from the noise that can easily disturb it. You need stillness to reset your nervous system, to recognize old emotions without repeating them, to reinforce new thoughts through action, not words. When you choose silence over sharing, choose to disappear for a while instead of asserting yourself, choose to work in the dark instead of waiting for recognition, you give yourself a safe space to grow without the pressure of proving anything. And that very silence becomes the clearest evidence of real change. No announcements, no declarations, no need for anyone's approval. When you live in alignment, when your actions and values become one, others will feel it. Not through what you say, but through your calm and steady presence. Eventually, you no longer feel the need to defend your transformation, because you are no longer someone who needs to be acknowledged. You are simply someone who has moved forward, who has quietly matured, and who keeps walking, not for anyone else, but for yourself. That is the sign of someone who has truly grown from within. 5. Master yourself. The world will quietly shift. We often think that to change the world around us, we need to do something big, loud, or bold. But to the Stoic, the opposite is true. You don't need to change the world. You only need to change yourself. When you realign your inner life, When you restore harmony between thought, emotion, and action, everything outside you adjusts on its own. No force needed, no control required, just your steadiness, and the world responds with quiet respect. In Stoic thought, the concept of coherence, inner alignment, is seen as the ideal state of being. It's when what you think doesn't contradict what you say, and what you do reflects the values you live by. When you reach that state, your energy shifts. You stop emitting chaos, stop resonating with the negative, and because of that, the people who once fed off your lack of clarity will begin to fade. Not because you push them away, but because there is nothing left for them to cling to. Self-mastery is a quiet process with far-reaching impact. You begin to realize that most of the chaos doesn't come from the situation, but from how you respond to it. When you change your perspective, your reaction, your inner habits, you reclaim agency over your life, and in that agency, you're no longer easily swayed by fleeting emotions, no longer letting others steer your direction with meaningless words. When you master your emotions, you respond from clarity, not pain. When you master your attention, you focus on what nourishes you, not what drains you. When you master your actions, you live by principle, not by impulse. And once those become your foundation, you no longer need to influence others through pressure. Your presence becomes the influence. The remarkable thing is, when you stabilize from within, you begin to attract those on the same frequency. The old relationships, built on drama and instability, will quietly dissolve. Not out of bitterness, but because you no longer fit that storyline. Instead, people of depth, of silence, of accountability will appear naturally. That's the law of resonance. Alignment doesn't need to be summoned, it finds its way when you live in truth. And from that moment on, you don't need to change anyone. You simply continue mastering yourself. Because when you become clear, calm, and stable, the world cannot help but respond. It doesn't bow to you, it simply rearranges itself to fit the person you've become. No declarations, no demands. Just a quiet, irreversible transformation, and that is how you change the world, by starting with yourself. 6. Don't fight chaos. Stop feeding it. Most of us believe that to escape chaos, we must fight it. With logic, with emotion, with action. But that is the very trap chaos sets. Because the moment you step into that battle, you are already fueling it. You're reacting, you're participating, and your involvement is what keeps it alive. The Stoic doesn't fight chaos. They stop feeding it. They pull their energy back, hold their clarity, and choose silence over instinct, principle over impulse. Chaos only survives when someone receives it. An attack only becomes harm when you allow it into your mind. Manipulation only works when you react with unhealed emotion. A toxic relationship only persists when you keep hoping, keep explaining, keep trying to find change in someone who never intended to change. The problem isn't them. The problem is that you still exist on a frequency that chaos can reach. So instead of trying to win, step out of the game. When you stop explaining, stop justifying, stop responding to what no longer deserves your energy, you reclaim control. And here's the strange part. You don't need to win to be free. You just need to stop showing up in places where your mind is being pulled downward. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to know that not every battle is yours to fight. Some things will wither simply because you stopped feeding them. That's a unique kind of strength, not in striking back, but in refusing to be pulled in. People will provoke you, test if you're still the same. They'll use the same old tricks. Loaded words, familiar reactions, psychological games you once fell for. But if you remain still, composed, and unresponsive, they'll begin to falter. Not because you're resisting, but because you're no longer the person they once controlled. And when there's nothing in you left to react, they'll have no reason to continue. The Stoic calls this inner freedom. It's the state where the outer world no longer defines your inner world. It's when you choose your battles wisely and gradually lose interest in what once made you lose control. Not because you've won, but because you no longer need to win. The peace you build now doesn't need to be proven through outer victory. It's nourished by your refusal to invest in what drains you. And from the moment you stop feeding chaos, it begins to retreat. No need for severance, no declarations, no raised voice. Just a different way of living, quiet, clear, deep, and chaos will recognize it has no home in your life anymore. Not because you defeated it, but because you no longer call it a friend. And that is the deepest kind of victory, one that requires no applause. 7. Attention shapes who you are. We often think of attention as a natural flow of thought, that we can focus on anything without consequence. But both Stoic philosophy and neuroscience reveal a deeper truth. You become what you consistently give your attention to. Not in a moment, but over time. That repetition reshapes your brain, builds emotional habits, behaviors, and the identity you carry through life. Seneca once warned that if you let your mind be pulled in every direction by trivial things, you'll lose yourself before you even realize it. Today, science calls this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on repeated experience. This means that if each day you spend time analyzing toxic people, waiting for them to change, worrying what they're thinking, replaying arguments, or imagining conversations that never happened, you're not just wasting time. You're carving a neurological pathway. You're training yourself to live in stress, hypervigilance, and emotional entanglement that feels like connection, but is really dependency. And what's frightening is that the brain doesn't distinguish between real threats and repeated imagination. If each day you dwell on pain, injustice, and disappointment, your nervous system will adapt to live in a state of defense. You'll grow hypersensitive to small details, easily triggered by a glance, a gesture, or a word, even when they're harmless. You lose clarity, and over time, you stop living in the present. You live in reflex, in old scripts your brain has memorized. But the hopeful truth is that you can retrain that system, not through bursts of effort, but through intentional attention. When you begin turning inward, noticing your breath, adjusting your posture, forming habits, staying consistent in your actions, you're slowly renewing your nervous system. Peace is not a state you wait for. It's the result of choosing stillness over emotional reaction 100 times. Through the Stoic lens, this is inner coherence, when reason, values, and action are unified. You no longer speak one thing, think another, and act out of impulse. You know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what it means to you. And in that state, those who once manipulated you begin to lose access. Not because you shut them out, but because they can no longer reach the new version of you. The one who knows attention is the most valuable asset and no longer wastes it on what weakens you. And in that silence, focus, and steadiness, you stop being someone shaped by circumstances. You become the architect of your inner world, and from there, your entire experience of life begins to shift. Not because of luck, but because you've learned to pay attention to what matters. 8. When you adjust your frequency, chaos stops staying. There's something we often overlook. You don't just communicate with words. Before you speak, you emit an invisible signal through breath, gaze, tension in your body, and the energy you carry into a room. All of that creates a living frequency that others sense, even if they can't name it. Those who live in chaos recognize that frequency easily, especially when it mirrors their own. And if you're still living in internal unrest, even if you try to mask it with outer confidence, chaos will find its way back to you, because you're signaling that it's welcome. The Stoic understands clearly that the outer world is only a reflection of the inner one. If your mind is scattered, your emotions reactive. If you keep responding without conscious choice, don't be surprised when you're constantly drawn into tension, unhealthy relationships, and draining conversations. You're not unlucky. You're resonating with the chaos you haven't cleared. But when you begin adjusting your frequency, when you choose to slow down, breathe deeper, react less, observe more, a quiet but profound shift begins. You lose interest in arguments. You no longer need to prove you're right. You stop being pulled into others' emotions like a boat tossed by waves. Peace no longer feels distant. It becomes the foundation of your decisions, and in that state, you emit a frequency that chaos can't stay near. From a biological view, this isn't mystical. When you regulate your nervous system through deep breathing, movement, time in silence, and living in alignment with your values, you bring your mind and body into stability. Your body no longer reacts as if in danger. Your mind no longer scans for threat. And when that state is sustained long enough, you no longer resonate with those drawn to drama. They'll feel out of place, unable to connect with the old signals. And so, they'll quietly leave. 9. If something steals your peace, it's too expensive. Some costs aren't paid in dollars, but in life energy, clarity, and mental longevity. A single comment that robs you of sleep. A look that leaves you anxious all day. A relationship that makes you feel like you're walking on eggshells. These may not cause instant harm, but over time, they erode you from within, bit by bit, until you no longer recognize yourself. The Stoics understood long ago that peace isn't a gift you're given. It's an asset to protect at all costs. And if a relationship, a habit, or an environment forces you to sacrifice that peace, then no matter how important it seems, it's already too expensive. Modern neuroscience confirms what Stoic philosophy taught centuries ago. Chronic stress doesn't just exhaust your spirit. It weakens your immune system, impairs memory, disrupts sleep, and accelerates aging. And one of the most common sources of that stress is people. Unstable relationships where you never know what's next, where you must weigh every word, where your energy is drained just to keep things okay. But you weren't born to live that way. You have no obligation to trade your clarity to salvage a toxic bond. You don't need to remain in environments that keep you in constant tension just because they're familiar. What you do need is to recognize when your peace is under threat and have the courage to step back, even if no one supports you, even if there's no perfect explanation, even if you don't yet know what's next. The Stoics never taught us to fight the world. They taught us to resist the subtle invasion of our own mind. And they reminded us, you can't control others, but you always control your response. You may not avoid injustice, cruelty, or negativity, but you can choose not to let them reach your core. Each time you walk away from a pointless argument, exit a suffocating space, or end a story that tightens your chest, you reaffirm your own worth. So if something or someone keeps stealing your peace, keeps unsettling your mind, keeps making you betray your principles just to keep them satisfied, then look directly at it and ask yourself, I'm paying with my inner stability. Is this truly worth it? And if the answer is no, then you know what must be done. No fighting, no explaining, just stop. Because your peace should never be the price you pay for anyone or anything. 10. Let your actions speak. There's a simple truth we often forget. People don't believe what you say. They believe what you repeatedly do. You can say you've changed, that you're no longer easy to manipulate, that you've learned how to set clear boundaries. But if your behavior still follows old patterns, if you return to the same relationships with the same expectations, your words will ring hollow. Toxic people don't need your explanations. They just watch. And the moment you soften, the moment you react in your old ways, they'll know the new version you're trying to show is only surface deep. Real strength isn't in declarations, but in consistency. It's when you don't need to say you've matured. Your steadiness makes others think twice about using their old tricks. It's when you don't need to say you're at peace. Your calm presence alone feels untouchable. It's when you don't need to announce your boundaries. The way you live becomes the boundary itself. Quiet, clear, and non-negotiable. The Stoic does not tell you to stay silent out of weakness. They urge silence to give you space to build depth. When you stay silent and act in alignment with your values, you create a presence that can't be pierced by doubt or attack. It's a kind of power that requires no voice but still commands respect. Because the truth is, you can't be manipulated if you no longer expose your weak spots. And weakness doesn't lie in feeling. It lies in the lack of alignment between what you say and what you do. Silence paired with right action generates a unique kind of energy. It makes you less accessible to familiar tactics. It confuses manipulators because they can't predict your response. And in that unpredictability, you reclaim control. No raised voice, no anger, no confrontation, just the repetition of clarity through action. How you say no, how you stick to your habits, how you refuse to let fleeting emotions dictate your behavior. Action is the loudest voice you have. It doesn't need others to understand right away. It doesn't seek acknowledgement. It only needs to be sustained, not to prove anything, but to protect the person you are becoming. And when you do that, your very presence begins to shift the atmosphere around you. I used to think that in order for toxic people to leave, I had to be tough, had to tell them I'd had enough. But the older I grew, the more I realized, words don't change people, especially those who thrive in chaos. The only thing that made them retreat was the quiet transformation within me. When I stopped reacting, stopped explaining, and stopped needing to be understood, I no longer tried to save what was no longer worthy. nor did I offer my energy to those who didn't value it. The peace I have today didn't come from winning arguments, but from choosing to walk away from every battle that wasn't mine. And that has been the most beautiful choice I've ever made. If you feel this resonates with any part of your own journey, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. And remember, the deepest kind of growth needs no announcement, only the quiet repetition of someone who chose to live differently, day by day. I'll see you in the next video.